Hey everyone, it's Tyler Putman with the Museum of the American Revolution, back for another one of our Artisan field trips. And if you haven't seen part one of our interview with Mitch Yates, check that out before watching this. It'll help explain the cool things we're up to. We are revisiting Mitch and the exciting project to recreate one of the rifles made by a man named Christian Oerter. This is a project we're really grateful to the Contemporary Longrifle Association for their sponsorship of. And now we're going to talk about the brass wire inlay work, the decorative inlay that appears on Oerter's rifles and which Mitch is recreating. Hey, Mitch, how are you?
Hey, Tyler, how are you? And welcome back to the shop.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited to learn a little bit more about this phase of the project and see some close-up videos and what you're up to.
Okay. Well, basically, what I'm going to demonstrate today, this particular Christian Oerter rifle has a lot of wire inlay, and that's kind of unique for early American long rifles. One of the only other places that you see a lot of wire inlay is in New England guns, and it's a total different style. And so this was a bit of a challenge because I've done a lot of silver wire inlay, and this is the first extensive brass inlay that I've done. And not only is it a little bit different because of material-wise, but Christian Oerter put some really long runs of wire in this particular firearm, which presents some challenges. So basically, the process is what you're doing is you're inlaying a ribbon of wire, in this case brass, and it's a flat wire. It's a ribbon on edge. And what I do is I take my wire, round wire, to my rolling mill, and I roll it flat. In the period, they could have been doing it that way, or they could have been cutting it out of sheet. When I do silver wire, I normally cut my silver out of sheet, but silver wire, particularly in New England, the wire is much thinner than it is in this particular rifle. Christian Oerter's wire finished out about 20 thousandths of an inch wide. New England wire in silver is usually about 7 thousandths. So this is quite a bit thicker and a little bit tougher than silver wire. And that's presented some neat challenges. Basically, for the very first part of the process, obviously, is your drawing. And you only get one shot at this. So I'm using Christian Oerter's artwork. And I use a series of French curves, which are drawing aids. And I also have an oval template here. And that allows me to draw my line smooth because you're only going to get one chance at cutting this line. So you want to make sure, first of all, that your artwork is as perfect as you can get it. Now, in order to open up the wood for this particular piece of wire, I had to make myself different chisels. And these are called stamping chisels for a better word. And they are stamped into the wood, and they are arched on the top, and they are lens shaped, and they are different widths. And what this does is it allows me to walk these chisels around a curve. Obviously, the more narrow chisel is for tighter curves. The wider chisel is for little more open curves or straight lines. So what you're going to do is you're going to tap this chisel into the wood. And what you want to do is you want to wedge that wood aside. And that's what these chisels are doing. They're pushing an opening that wire is going to then sit down into. Once I've established that line, I go through with another set of chisels that I've made. And these are lens shaped, but they're flat on the bottom. These aren't cutting chisels. These are bottoming chisels. And again, they're lens shaped, so they'll go around the curve. And if you remember, my initial chisels are U-shaped. So what happens is as I stamp around, I end up with little U-shaped divots at the bottom of my channel. So I need to go in with this particular tool and flatten those little U's out so that I have a uniform depth for my wire to sit into. And these are designed to have a little stop on them so that I can set the depth of my wire. And I want my wire to be just a little bit proud of the wood. I don't want it to go underneath the wood. I want to be able to file a little bit off of that. Once I've done all of that, I'm going to set the wire in there. And you don't want to have to bang on that wire. And that's why you want to make sure it's open. Because if you bang on the wire will actually upset and get wider, and you'll have lumps in your wire, which isn't going to look very good. So once I've rolled my wire, And I'm gonna see if I can, I don't know if you can see my vise. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set my wire up on edge in a vise. And I'm gonna take a chisel and I'm gonna tap on that wire. And you'll be able to see a little clip of this being done up close. And what that's doing is that's putting a burr on the bottom of the wire. And all those little taps put burrs along the bottom edge. So once I set the wire in there, those burrs are going to be at the bottom of that little trench. When I put water on it, the wood fibers are going to swell up and it's going to lock that wire in place. So you can't pull that wire out. If you look at a lot of original firearms, a lot of times the wire is missing. And what's happened is the firearm has dried out completely. The little edge of wire has caught on something and been pulled out. So this is a method that we use to hopefully make that wire stay in there. So I have my piece of wire here, and I've drawn a little curve here, and I'm going to take the patch box out so that I don't damage it. And I'm just going to set my chisel in there on my pencil line. And I know this is kind of like watching paint dry, but and I can walk that little chisel right around that curve. And I do this twice because this particular wire is kind of wide, and I'm trying to keep it all at the same depth, even though I'm going to come in with the bottoming chisel. I want to make sure that all of it is wide enough so that I don't have to force the wire in there too much. I want the wire to kind of set down in there to the bottom of my. All right, now that I've gone through there twice, I'm going to take the chisel, and it has a small notch there that I'm going to use as a depth stop. And I'm going to follow that. Now that I've set the depth, I have a piece of wire, and I've prepped this wire a little bit. The difference with brass wire as opposed to silver wire is with silver wire, I can set it in there and wiggle it around, and it'll form the shape as I go because it's much more flexible. With the brass wire, I've found that I've had to pre-form a lot of this. So what I did was I snipped the end, and then I filed the end. So if this was a contemporary piece and I wasn't trying to copy Christian Oerter's work, I would very carefully file these ends so that as it comes to the end of a tendril, the wire actually gets thinner and it's a little cleaner. Christian Oerter didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that, and several other builders in the period didn't. So I've probably paid a little bit more attention than Christian Oerter did, but I don't want to pay too much attention because I want this to look like Christian's work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that wire just gently in the groove where it starts on one end, and then I'm going to mark where it finishes up on the other end. And I have a little pair of nippers here. And I'm going to cut the wire to length. And then I'm going to file the edge, because where I cut it, even though I don't want it to be super smooth, it does have a burr on it. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to file that burr off so that where that little tendril comes around, it tapers to a pretty fine end. Okay. And I just dropped it. Of course, when you're live. So now I have a shaped piece I have all my little burrs on the bottom. So I'm going to set that piece of wire up on edge into the groove. And then probably in the period, they would use a wooden mallet. But I have a little plastic face mallet here that I use. And I just tap that wire in down into the groove. So now I'm proud, maybe just a 32nd of an inch over the top of the groove. And if you have little kinks or things like that, in other words, this one's pretty smooth, it's a short run. But if you have little kinks, you can actually take a polished punch and straighten the wire up. And when the wood swells up, it will keep that nice smooth curve. So then what I do is I take the little pipette of water here, and I just do this with the pipette because I kind of want the water to go in alongside the wire down to the bottom of the trough there. And now what's happening is those wood fibers are going to open right back up again, and they're going to trap that piece of wire in there. And normally I would let that dry and I would move on to another piece of wire. But I'm going to dry it. Now with silver wire, I could take a very sharp chisel and I could cut right along the top of the wood and just cut that off. And that's actually a better way of doing it, because by filing it, what's going to happen is I'm going to form a burr on the top of the wire. So the wire is actually going to look wider than it is. So I can't do that with brass wire. So what I did was when I rolled my wire, I actually rolled it about 14 thousandths, so that once I file it, that burr is going to read, the top of the wire is going to read 20 thousandths, which is what Christian Oerter's gun for the most part read. There is some variation, obviously. So once that's dried, I'm going to take a coarse file, first of all. And again, I want to try to follow the wire lengthwise so that I put as small a burr as I can on there. I don't want to make it any worse than it is. So I'm just following that wire around. And you want to make sure you clear the brass dust off, because you don't want it to scratch the stock very deeply, and that'll happen. So once I get down to, it's just a little bit proud, I'm going to go to a finer file, and I'm going to finish it off. And what I'll do tomorrow, once I finish all the wire, is I'll wet the whole stock again, which will raise all the grain. And then I'll go through with a scraper and actually scrape the surface. And that will get rid of any file marks that's on the wire and get rid of any other things that I don't want on there, and any of the dirt and things that are in there. So I don't know if I can, maybe I can move this down a little bit and you can see the piece of wire that I just put in. Can you see that? Okay.
I can imagine a lot of people wondering why and for how long this would be worth it. So obviously this has no real functional quality, but do you have any sense now, having done this, when we look at the original Oerter rifles that we're so lucky to have both in our collection on loan, what kind of hours of labor are we talking about for just the brass inlay portion?
As of right now, and I'm not finished with this, and Christian did a lot more of it than I did, and I've gotten faster as I've gone. But I probably have 50 or 60 hours in it so far. And I think I have about another 10 hours to go in order to finish. I have the back side of this is done. And I'm going to provide a video of all the wire work once it's done tomorrow. The tang is pretty much done. I still have some around the lock plate, and I have a little bit up around the entry pipe to finish. So it's about 10 hours. So I think it's probably a week's work for, I'm just guessing, but unless he was a whole lot faster at it than I was or had a better method. And I don't think he did.
That's amazing. Well, we cannot wait to see the results of your work here. We're really grateful for your talent and skill, and to the Contemporary Longrifle Association for their sponsorship of this project. And we can't wait for folks to visit the museum and be able to see real rifles made by Christian Oerter, and then hold this replica in their hands and imagine what it was like during the American Revolutionary period to encounter such an amazing object like this. So thank you again.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the project, and I'm excited to get it into your hands. It's been a while, but it hopefully will be finished in another week or so. I'm going to display it at the Contemporary Longrifle Show down in Kentucky, then it will be on to the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. So. But it's been a fun project. I've learned a lot, and it's been fun.
Well, we can't wait. Thank you again, Mitch.
You're welcome.